Second base, kind of a weird one. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Tuesday, February 10th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. Today on the show, our 2026 second base preview. We will do an overview of the position. We'll talk strategy, deep dives on specific players, sleepers, breakouts, busts, favorite to draft, ADP analysis, all that good stuff. Let's start with a macro look at second base. And Brice Turang had his big breakout. Jazz Chisholm went 30-30 in just 130 games. Just one second baseman provided more than $20 worth of value in 12-team roto or category leagues last season. 4 provided $15. For reference, we just spoke about first base the other day. There were 4 first basemen who gave $20+ and 13 with 15+. So again, for second base, only 1 with 20+. Only 4 with 15+. So not a plentiful position up at the top. In CBS head-to-head points leagues, we had 0 second basemen with 500+ fantasy points. There were 4 at first base, only 7 with 400+ fantasy points, and 14 of those at first base. So again, I don't think there's not a lot of high-end talent here at second base, but Scott, I think for deeper leagues, there's a lot of serviceable, solid depth, high floor options later on in drafts, but it is just seriously lacking high-end talent.
Yeah, I don't know that I would say there are high floor options. I think there are some interesting ceiling options later in drafts. But it feels pretty risky. Pretty risky, not particularly high at the high end. And while I think you have an interesting number of fallback options, an interesting number of genuinely interesting fallback options, it's not like I feel confident drafting Jorge Polanco as my starting second baseman. I'm intrigued, but I don't feel confident. I feel like there's a good chance I'm going to have to pivot to somebody else by the middle of May. So, yeah, it's not a position that gives me a lot of confidence. And that goes for everybody drafting though. Somebody's going to get Ketel Marte. Somebody's going to get Jazz Chisholm. They're going to pay a premium to do it. Not that those guys are particularly safe either. I mean, they both have an injury history. Somebody's going to pay a premium for those two, and they'll be in better shape, at least going into the season because of that. But everyone else is going to be taking on some degree of risk, and they're going to be playing favorites in terms of who they're most confident will meet the full extent of their potential, who's going to stay healthy when they don't normally, who's going to bounce back from a down year. A lot of guesswork's going to go into that. A lot of hunches are going to be played. And some people are going to guess right. Others are going to guess wrong. And you just hope, if you're on the side that guesses wrong, that you have somebody to pivot to when that happens.
Chris, I call this a weird position up at the top. I do think that it's maybe the position that changes most, at least for me, depending on the format. I feel like head-to-head points, you could find a lot of guys later on that will give you high 2 fantasy point per game, like 2.8, 2.9. And if you just miss out on everyone else and wait, you could just snag one of those guys later on in the drafts. And then in a categories league, it just kind of, what do you need? Do you need steals? You can find someone for that. You need batting average. You can find someone for that. So I think it kind of changes depending on the format. And there's kind of like a great or late feel to second base for me.
Yeah, to highlight that, last year, according to the player rater on Fangraphs, there were, I think third base is the position, second base, you can compare them most comparably, I think. And last year at third base, there were 6 players who were worth at least $17, which is more than at second base. Second base, there were only 3. But the number 7 third baseman last year was worth $5.3. The number 16 second baseman was worth $5.3. So I think you're right to say that the high-end impact is a little lacking here, and I think that's, as Scott pointed out, especially true for the 2 highest-end guys who, Jazz Chisholm and Ketel Marte, are awesome players. They do a lot well. they're priced, especially Jazz. I mean, Jazz is just a second rounder in every format right now.
Mid to late second rounder. Yeah.
That dude's missed a lot of time in his career, famously. Now, the last couple of years, 147, 130 games, you'll take that. Like, if he just does what he did last year, 130 games, 31 homers, 31 steals, you're thrilled. I mean, even with the second round pick, it could be better, I suppose, but I think you're fine with it. I think second base has, as you said, Frank, a lot of useful options throughout the draft, depending on what you like. It's sort of the island of misfit toys when it comes to fantasy, right? Like, you've got cheap sources of batting average. You've got cheap sources of batting average. You've got cheap, like 15 guys all the way through the draft. I'm not a huge Matt McClain fan, but like outside the top 200 for a guy who's got a decent chance at 2020. I know he went 15 and 18 last year. Takes a little projecting, but I think there's that upside. You can get Brendan Donovan for super cheap batting average, or Luis Arias will be second base eligible fairly early on and will be a great source of batting average. There are guys at every part of the draft, to the point where I don't think you really have to be too conscious about your approach to second base. You don't want to just ignore it entirely, but I don't necessarily think this is a position where you have to get one of those impact. I think it's more important to get an impact bat at third base if you're going to play the position scarcity game, just because once those impact bats are gone at third base, there's just not very much at all. There's bad sluggers basically at third base, where second base just has a little more breadth of skill sets throughout the draft that I think makes it a little easier to find whatever you need at any point in the draft.
Yeah, once you get past the top 5 at second base, I would say, and then maybe there are 2 or 3 others that are borderline in that group of being safe. It kind of depends. It's kind of a matter of perspective, but I would say there are 5 who everyone would agree are pretty safely going to be starters for you all season long. But once you get past those 5, it kind of feels like just play your best hunch. Just play your best hunch. And so
or just play whatever you need,
worth,
right? Like, you get to a point where you need a specific skill set, then you can narrow your list down.
Yeah, certainly from like a roto context, because there are those category specialists at second base. But I don't know that it makes sense to really invest much of anything at second base, great or late, like you were saying, Frank. Like, there's the 5 who you feel confident in. And then, there are some I feel better about than others. Some I'd be willing to pay a little more for than others. But for the most part, it's like, okay, Matt McClain could be great, or he could be awful. Ozzie Albies could be great, or he could be pretty disappointing. I think there are different probabilities of the good outcome for each of those players, and maybe that helps factor in the price. But, those are kind of at the 2 extremes of you don't really know what you're getting. Albies being on the high end and McClain being on the low end.
Those 5 second basemen that Scott is referring to, by the way, that we feel pretty good about just being our starters all season: Jazz Chisholm, Ketel Marte, Brice Turang, Nico Hoerner, and Jose Altuve. We'll get to all those in just a little bit. Chris, it sounds like you don't really have an intentional strategy here at second base, but we're right in the thick of draft prep season, mock draft season. Every week, get an email from Scott about a new mock draft that's going down. So is there a second baseman or a group of second basemen that you've found yourself targeting or winding up with a lot in some of these early drafts?
I don't think I've taken one inside the top 100 yet. I mean, I've only done like 5 or 6 drafts so far. But I think I like the relative price of the guys outside of the top 100 a lot more. Keaschall, Ozzie Albies, Brandon Lowe, kind of just those 3 especially, just sort of depends on what I'm looking for, right? Keaschall, I think he's going to be a stolen base specialist. Albies a little more well-rounded. Brandon Lowe, the best power bat at the position. So just kind of depends what you need, but I like that kind of middle class at the position a lot more.
Scott, same question for you, second base.
I mean, I wouldn't say I have an intentional strategy. I'm not reaching for the top 5. I do find, though, that I just generally a little higher than the consensus on Brice Turang. I tend to be an optimist in terms of how his power is going to play, and we'll get more into that, I'm sure, because he's an interesting case. So I tend to be a little higher on him, but it's not like my whole draft strategy depends on getting Brice Turang. If somebody else gets him, it's usually like round 4, I think, where I'm getting him when I do. If somebody else grabs him before I can, that's fine. I'm happy to roll the dice on an Ozzie Albies or even later, like a Marcus Semien.
Yeah. I think again, for me, it kind of changes depending on the format. In a head-to-head points league, I would be totally fine taking someone like Ketel Marte in round 2 or 3. He's just so good in that format, 3.5 fantasy points per game. If I miss out on him, it's just a value game. If one of those top 7 or 8 slips a little bit, I could see myself getting in on those. If not, I'll probably just wait in a points league. Gleyber Torres, Jorge Polanco, Marcus Semien, Brendan Donovan, all profile as pretty good options in that format. And then in a categories league, I do like Nico Hoerner quite a bit around pick 100. He's not the sexiest pick of all time, but there's something about knowing what you're going to get, and you pretty much know what you're going to get with Nico Hoerner. So I do like that. If I miss on him, take a shot on like Luke Keaschall, Ozzie Albies in that 125 to 150 range of ADP. If you play in a league with a middle infield spot in Roto, again, there's lots of options there. We'll talk about all those, like Semien goes late. Jorge Polanco, they're outside the top 200. Bryson Stott could give you like 25 to 30 steals. Did just want to make this the distinction early on that if you play on Yahoo, players like Michael Garcia and Jordan Westberg have second base eligibility. They do not on CBS or NFBC. So just keep that in mind. We're not going to talk about those guys on today's episode because, again, CBS, they don't have that. But we will talk about them on their respective. I think both of them are just third base eligible.
I also want to point out there are a few players who will be gaining second base eligibility fairly early on.
Luis Arraez. I think Caleb Durbin does not have second base eligibility, but seems very likely. Oh, he does? Okay. Yeah.
JJ Weatherholt seems like a pretty good bet to play second base for the Cardinals. There was one other one that I can't. Well,
I lied about Caleb Durbin. He does not.
Okay, I didn't think so. All right. I was literally just writing about it. Maybe Kevin McGonigal, although that would probably require Gleyber Torres injury for him to play second base. Yeah, that's probably...
Yeah, Arraez and Weatherholt kind of stand out. As
the Mariners guy, Colt Emerson. I think there's a possibility he could play some second base, although I think it's more likely he's third baseman if he breaks camp. But yeah, there's a handful of interesting guys who, especially among those prospects, they're all shortstops right now. A decent amount of them will end up second baseman or third baseman as soon as this year, I think.
On the day this podcast is released, we are there. Kind of. Pitchers and catchers have reported. Let's go. 10 games and 10 days until spring games. We have 22 days until the World Baseball Classic, 43 days until opening day. And if you are pumped, you are ready for the baseball season, hit that like button. And if you want to win your fantasy baseball league, subscribe to our YouTube channel and enjoy all the free content. We have so much stuff coming out over the next 2 months for draft prep season. And then boom, in season, it's, we've got a podcast out every weekday. And so it's going to be a very, very busy time. Subscribe if you haven't already. Let's take our first break.
40K by opening day. 40K by opening day.
That's
Many people are saying it.
Thank you for reminding me, Chris. Let's take that
Whispering
break.
it.
We'll be back right after this.
This isn't just combat. It's cinema.
Ready or not, here I come. Let's go! Are you not entertained?
The new home of UFC, Paramount Plus.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball today. It is our second base preview for 2026, and let's get into the ADP, average draft position. We're using Fantasy Pros ADP, which is an aggregate of now 6 different sources: CBS, Yahoo, NFBC, Fantrax, RT Sports, and ESPN. So as always, subject to change. Nobody in the first round of second base ADP, but there are 2 names in that round 2 to 3 range. We have Jazz Chisholm Jr. at 22.8 and Ketel Marte at 27.4. Let's start with Jazz. 30-30 last year in just 130 games. His full season pace, 38 homers, 38 steals. He has really leaned into this fly ball approach as a lefty in Yankee Stadium. He missed a month last year with a strained right oblique and has an extensive injury history. As we mentioned, he's only exceeded 130 games once in his career, but entering a contract year, and sometimes guys just find a way to stay healthy in a contract year. So, Scott, it sounds like you don't kind of force it. Can you see yourself taking a Jazz Chisholm in the second round of drafts this season?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can see it toward the end of round 2. There comes a point where he's just the obvious guy to take. I mean, that's for the most part what I'm doing. In round 2 especially, maybe even more than round 1, is just, okay, it's the right time to take this guy. I'm not going to force it. I mean, I'm not going to fight against it. So I have Jazz Chisholm 20. That's for points leagues. In Roto, I have Jazz Chisholm. 23rd overall. So yeah, toward the 1-2 turn, if he happens to be there, I'm willing to take him. I think we have a pretty good idea who he is at Yankee Stadium. He's stayed relatively healthy the last 2 years. You never feel great about his health. He's never played 150 games in a season even. But, with 130, he got to 30-30 last year. It's going to be a little bit of a hindrance in batting average. But I think the fact that he's eligible at the 2 hardest positions to fill. I mean, we're talking about him being one of just 5 standouts at second base and the number 1 at second base. But as we were just saying, third base might be even harder to fill as the draft goes on. So you may go in thinking, okay, I'm drafting Jazz Chisholm, elite second baseman, checking that position off. And then come to find out, I'd actually rather start him at third base. And that primo eligibility, I think, is a big point in Jazz Chisholm's favor.
Yeah, I do like that. And I've talked about that in years past with players that have that dual position eligibility, especially high-end players. It just affords you more flexibility throughout the draft where, man, if the best hitter here is a third baseman, all right, slide him over to second and vice versa, where you can play him at third if you really like a second base value. So I do like that flexibility that it awards you throughout the course of the draft. For a format for Jazz, he's better in a Roto and Categories League, right?
Absolutely.
Definitely. But I don't rank him that much lower in points because with the smaller lineup sizes and points, there's even a higher priority to fill weak positions with strong players. And again, Jazz Chisholm is one of the strongest at 2 of the weakest.
Yeah. One of the other strongest players at second base is Ketel Marte, the best pure hitter at the position. He has reached a consistent elite level the past 2 years, posting an .893 OPS or better in both. Strong batting average, 4-category contributor, not many steals at this point in his career. Awesome plate discipline, just makes him the best second baseman in head-to-head points leagues, 3.5 fantasy points per game last year on CBS. But like Jazz, has consistently missed time with injury, probably looking at 25 to 30 missed games throughout the course of the year. There were trade talks this offseason. He's not on the move. He's remaining in Arizona. He's hit well there. It's obviously a good lineup, so I don't really worry about any of that stuff for Ketel Marte. Chris, can you see yourself actually drafting Ketel Marte in that round 2 to 3 range?
It is easier to see it in a points league. I think in a Roto league, not getting stolen bases is always tough. And with one of your first 2 picks, and you think about where he's going off the board, and it's usually, I guess, more like the end of round 3 in a 12-team league, at least based on NFBC ADP. I think we all rank him a little higher than that, probably more to the 2-3 turn. And that's where you start to think, like, I don't really know if Shohei Ohtani is a great bet for more than like 20 steals now that he's pitching again. His pace last year after we returned to the mound was like 14 steals. I'm not sure enough people recognize that about Shohei Ohtani. Judge is, you'll get double-digit steals, but not much more than that. Soto, if he's the number 3 pick, I don't really know what to expect. It could be 15. It could be 30 again. But when you start doing that math, it's like, well, am I going to get out of the first 2 rounds with 15 steals projected from my top 2 players? That's not great. Now, if Marte's more like a late third, that makes it a little easier to justify. But yeah, that's an awkward fit, especially for a guy who is a good source of batting average, but last 3 seasons, it's 276, 292, 283. If that's the range and 283 is kind of the midpoint, it's pretty good. Certainly you're not upset about that, but it's not like carrying your team in batting average. So I think Ketel Marte does present some team building quandaries, but on the whole, I'd still be happy with him as my third player, certainly.
Yeah. Would be totally fine. Again, with him in a points league, I would go as far as say like mid to late second rounder. I think that would be totally fine to get that advantage.
The gap there, Marte 3.53 points per game last year, 3.53. Chisholm's 3.24. Now Chisholm was that's still third best in points per game at the position at second base. Second best was a less established player who we'll talk about shortly. So, Jazz Chisholm still stands out in points leagues at this position, but Ketel Marte is kind of a little more in a tier of his own.
Yeah, I do think, to your point, Chris, like you could pair Marte with a J-Ram or a Bobby Witt. Obviously, those guys projected for like 30-plus steals. It's easier to pull it off. I do think in category leagues, you're probably more likely to get Marte in the third round of drafts. So, if you can get Bobby Witt or J-Ram with like a Churio or Trey Turner, and then you get Ketel Marte, it's like, all right, that's a pretty good base all around of the stats that you're looking for from your first three hitters. After Marte, you drop down to Brice Turang, who represents an island of second base ADP. He is going at 46 on average, so that's about 20 picks after Marte, but 50 picks ahead of the next second baseman, who is Nico Hoerner. So again, it's just this Brice Turang island that we're on here, and he just finished as the top second baseman in roto and category leagues. He was the second best second baseman in total head-to-head points. He has finished as a top 50 overall player 2 years in a row. Of course, he did it in very different ways the past 2 years. He improved dramatically as a hitter. He upped his bat speed and exit velocity. His home run total nearly tripled, but his stolen bases were cut in half. So we are left trying to figure out who is the real Brice Turang. So, Scott, what are your expectations for Turang this season? And is he worth a pick in the round 4 or 5 range of a 12-team league?
I think he is. I actually rank him more like a third rounder. Now, I think that's mostly because I have in my rankings a drought for starting pitchers. I just don't rank any between early round 2 and early round 4, which I think slides some hitters up, Turang included. But I have him ranked more like a third rounder, even though, just the way the draft plays out, I'm more likely taking him around 4. But I'm an optimist, bottom line. It's an interesting case for sure. It's not often that you see a player as established as Brice Turang see his exit velocities go up by 4 miles per hour. That is both average and max. That is a huge transformational gain. I think the percentile rankings put it in perspective. Average exit velocity, he went from 14th percentile, slap hitter basically, to 75th percentile, a guy who could genuinely hit for power and good power. The problem was he was still opposite field minded, to an extreme. More balls hit the opposite field than pulled, and tended to put the ball on the ground still. So the pull air rate was very low. It was a lot of wasted impact. It was helping him be a better hitter overall, but he wasn't delivering the power you'd expect for somebody with those exit velocities until August, when he hit 11 home runs. So 11 of his, how many was it? 18?
Yeah, 10 of his 18 came in
10
August.
of his 18, excuse me. 10 home runs in August, 10 of the 18, that 1 month. Where, you look at the batted ball data, he was elevating and pulling better. He was, seemingly figuring it out. And then came September, and he just hit 2 home runs and wasn't elevating. And so it was just that 1 month. Like, he delivered the full extent of his power potential. That, as long as he doesn't lose exit velocity, which I wouldn't expect, remains latent in there. That power potential exists, and for that one glorious month, we saw Brice Turang make good on it. So there is a way he could pull this all together. We have some proof of concept from that 1 August. And you combine 20 homer power, let's say. I mean, he got to 18. The strange path he took there, he got to 18, pretty close to 20. So 20 homer power with the 50 steals he had in 2024. And I think you're talking about a potential second round caliber player here. It's obviously not fully proven. That's why I'm not drafting him in round 2. but I'm happy to take him in round 4 in pursuit of that upside, especially at a position this week. This week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, if I'm just conservatively, I guess, trying to figure out, what do I expect this year? You look at his, he hit 288 last year, the XBA the past 2 years, right around 260. So, I think 260 to 270, 15-ish home runs, 30-plus steals, good counting stats. He's projected to bat second in the Brewers lineup. But between Chourio and Contreras, you have Christian Yelich in there too. So I think the counting stats could be really good. Is that worth it? Again, that's just a modest projection, but there is an upside, a bull case like Scott just laid out where, if everything comes together, we could maybe get that massive season here from Brice Turang. From a format perspective, better in categories or head-to-head points, Brice Turang?
I think it's lean roto, but probably pretty close overall.
Yeah. After Turang, you drop down about 50 picks, as I mentioned earlier, and you get Nico Hoerner with an ADP of 94 and Jose Altuve with an ADP of 98. So very close to each other, just inside the top 100, rounds 8 or 9 in a 12-team league right now. Nico Hoerner, again, like I said earlier, there's just something about knowing what you're going to get from a player. Hoerner has pretty much been the same player 3 years in a row. His average season during that time, 284 batting average, 7.7 homers, not great, but 91 runs, 69 RBI, 34 steals. So you're getting the batting average, you're getting the speed, you're getting the runs scored here. The 43 steals that we got in 2023, that looks like an outlier. He's been right around 30 in the 2 years since. He's incredibly durable, 150 plus games each of the past 3 years. I think it's more of a floor play than anything, entering a contract year if you're into that kind of thing. Chris, like I mentioned, I kind of like him in a categories league because, in that range of the draft, to get a batting average and a speed boost feels kind of good. But how about you? What do you think about Hoerner?
I think the thing I like most about Nico Hoerner is there are a lot of stolen base guys you can target outside of the top 100 who are kind of only stolen base guys or who are actively detrimental in batting average, let's say. And he's one who's a clear plus in 3 categories. Batting average, stolen bases, and runs. He is good to exceptional in all 3. He's a non-zero contributor in the other 2 categories. And it kind of just depends on what your team build looks like. If you need the speed and the batting average in that range, I think he's arguably the best choice. I mean, you could go a little cheaper with Chandler Simpson, but there's real playing time concerns there. And there's Dylan Cruz and even Jacob Marcy. You could see those guys having that kind of skill set, but Hoerner, like you said, there's something to be said for knowing you're going to get that, especially at that point in the draft where you're no longer really just looking for the best player. You're often looking for the best fit for your specific team. And the problem with even a Luke Keaschall, who's a little cheaper, who I like a lot, I think he's going to be a standout in stolen bases and runs at least. And I think he should be good in batting average. There's just no guarantee of it. And Luke Keaschall has ranges of outcomes on the low end where he's in the minors by May. That's not going to happen for Nico Hoerner. Yeah, he's a great defensive player. They like him. He's proven he's going to stay in the lineup long enough to figure it out, even if he does get off to a slow start. I can't say that about Jacob Marcy or Chandler Simpson or Luke Keaschall. I hope that's true of all of them, but it's definitely not a guarantee in the way it is with Hoerner. So I like the certainty that he gives you, but he's also very much a known commodity, and his limitations are very obvious as well. So I think Nico Hoerner is very much do I need what he specifically provides at that point in the draft, 8th to 10th round? Go ahead and take him. If not, I think it's very easy to move on from him as well.
Yeah. As we spoke about on our first base preview, it seems like we all like Bryce Harper and Rafael Devers and Matt Olson. And, specifically with Olson and Devers, if you draft someone like that in the 3rd or 4th round, their batting average isn't going to hurt you, but it's not going to help you. So, to pair one of those guys with a Nico Hoerner, it feels like a pretty good combination of stats and what they provide, the expectation for the season. Something I just thought of now, and haven't really thought of it much before this, but Cubs signed Alex Bregman, and Matt Shaw is just kind of floating around. Is there any chance that Nico Hoerner just loses a little bit of playing time over the course of the season, and he's just not a compiler like he has been in years past. Like, even if he gets like one game off a week, I mean, that adds up over the course of the season, you know?
Yeah, but I doubt it. I mean, Hoerner brings so much defensive upside too.
He's been a 4 to 4.8 WAR player 4 years in a row.
He's quietly really good.
Matt Shaw has some potential, I suppose, but what we have seen of Matt Shaw on the major league field does not suggest that Nico Hoerner should ever come off the field for him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd argue
with you. I hope Craig Counsell does.
We're talking about Nico Hoerner as pretty high end, and I want to call him truly high end, but bolstered by the position scarcity, he's somewhat high end in fantasy, and I think he's even better in real life, is what I was building up to.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, I actually don't love drafting him in roto or especially head-to-head categories with fewer roster spots or fewer lineup spots to balance all the stats. I just think home runs is the offensive category where one little misstep and you're treading water the rest of the draft. So I don't like taking that big of a hit in home runs early. I actually like Nico Hoerner more in points leagues. I mean, he was 2.95 points per game last year. He's pretty consistently on the 3 bubble, which at a position like this is, you're not going to find too many hitters better than that. So I know you're about to ask, is it better points league or categories, roto league player? And you might naturally be inclined to think, oh, roto, because batting average standout and especially stolen base standout. But I actually think it's points. As long as your league is 2 points per steal, like standard CBS leagues are.
Yeah, 7% strikeout rate last year is really valuable in a points league.
Yeah, I think he's probably just really valuable in both. I hear the argument, Scott. I like what Nico Hoerner allows you to do. I know he brings down the power a lot when you draft him around pick 100, but he allows you to, later on you could take maybe a power guy with a lower batting average and feel a little bit better about it just because you have that batting average buffer in there with Nico Hoerner. Let's talk about Jose Altuve. Like Freddie Freeman, Altuve is clearly in decline, but it's mostly been graceful to this point. He's good for solid power and counting stats. Batting average doesn't kill you, but is 265 last year, his lowest since the shortened 2020 season. Also, the steals came down from 22 in 2024 down to 10 last year. Not sure we're going to see that go back up at this point in Altuve's career. He also had a minor procedure this offseason to remove fluid from his right foot. He says he's 100% healthy heading into the spring, but just something we should mention, obviously. Scott, I still think Jose Altuve is fine, but I'm not really excited to draft him at ADP. I think if he slips a little bit, sure, I could be in. It's just, I don't know, Altuve, like with him and Freeman, I don't know. It's just like these aging guys just feel really nervous that it could just all go away very quickly for them.
Well, I did call Freddie Freeman my favorite first baseman to draft this year at cost. It's worth pointing out.
Are we doing the same with Altuve?
I haven't had an opportunity to draft Altuve yet. I think this tends to happen where the people I draft with, which are people around the industry, they tend to, I guess they just tend to be more in sync with me than with the NFBC crowd, because a lot of times these players that I see as obvious discounts, Altuve going 115th. Where do I have him ranked? I have him ranked, that's position by position. I have him ranked 82nd. So I'm way ahead of the consensus on Jose Altuve. And theoretically, even though it hasn't happened yet, I should be drafting him a lot. I think kind of like Freeman, you can see the cracks starting to show, but it's very gradual, this decline. And I think it's being exaggerated, especially in Altuve's case, to such a degree that there isn't, I mean, if you really get him outside of pick 100, I don't see a lot of ways that goes wrong for you, given his, I don't know. I guess it's possible anytime a player's in his mid-30s, the bottom could just fall out. But generally speaking, that doesn't happen. And he's coming off a good year still. I think it'd be fine at this weak position. There are a few, like he's one of the 5 we talked about trusting, and he's the most affordable of it by pretty big degree.
One thing I want to point out in talking about how things could go wrong for Altuve is, one, we've just kind of seen this gradual decline, and I think the contact skills and pull-heavy approach have helped him avoid falling off too much. But I could see some like Marcus Semien here where it's just these relatively small declines in skill set could have a very large impact in the aggregate eventually, just because – he's not hitting 400-foot homers. He's hitting 350-foot homers. And so if those turn into 340-foot homers, and they're not quite angled in the right way as often this time, they're a little more out. I'm making the case, right? But also, I want to point out one other thing.
I'm saying if Marcus Semien had been playing in Houston the last couple of years, I don't think we'd think of him as being so much on the decline either.
Right, but Altuve's already playing, and like that's already baked into his price. But we're already seeing the decline from Altuve is what I'm saying. Like he is continuing. He has played in
26 homers last year.
Right, but he had a 900 OPS 3 years ago, 2023, right?
Yeah, he's been like sub 800.
Yeah, he's been sub 800 the last 2 years, and that's fine because, like I said, he's a pretty good source of batting average, and he still pulls the ball. But there was a quote from Joe Espada in The Athletic last week, February 4th. The way Chandler Rome says it, injuries around the roster forced the manager to play Altuve 155 games, far more than he would have envisioned for a player who will turn 36 in May. Quote, if we didn't have the amount of injuries, I could have given Jose some extra days off his feet. Basically just talking about needing to be a little more conscious about giving Jose Altuve playing time or time off. I think their unwillingness to move Isaac Paredes for the asking price on the market is probably a result of that. They're in a weird spot where they need extras. They need extra hands on deck to account for Yoenis Alvarez needing time off, and Christian Walker and Jose Altuve and Carlos Correa. Like they've got a very injury prone or old team, but they also, Isaac Paredes is probably over qualified to be a strict utility guy. So they're in a weird spot in terms of their roster. But I think in just reading that, I would think Altuve, in an ideal world, probably plays more like 140 games than 160 games.
And it makes it harder for him to be a compiler that way.
But he's going 98th instead of 47th like last year.
Sure.
And 32nd the year before.
Right.
Like, so much of this is beyond accounted for in his draft cost.
Yeah, I mostly agree. I have him a little lower than that, but I have him not far from his price. So I think he's fine. I just can't say he's like a big target for me. I do think at some point the bottom's going to fall out. And I don't think we've seen it yet, thankfully. But yeah, I think he's fine.
So better in a categories league or head-to-head points, like 2.8.
Pretty close.
2.8 fantasy points per game. I mean, this is he's just not really a standout. And Gleyber Torres averaged 2.8 fantasy points per game, and he's going outside the top 200. So that's why it's like, I don't know. Why am I
Yeah, well, but Gleyber's a weird case because he's so mediocre in Roto. And last year, at least, was really quite good in points. So that's his plate discipline was exceptional last year in a way I don't think you can count on again.
Mm-hmm. I think just because Altuve is not really a category, it doesn't really stand out in any category anymore. I think of him as better in points leagues, but I don't mind the cost in Roto.
All right, let's take our final break. When we return, back into second base ADP right after this.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball. Today, our second base preview here for 2026. And let's continue on with second base ADP. After Altuve, you drop down about 25 picks where you find three names going pretty close to each other. We have Luke Keaschall with an ADP of 123, Jackson Holliday at 125, and Ozzie Albies at 127. Round 11 or 12 of a 12-team league in this range. And let's talk about Luke Keaschall, 23 years old, a top prospect for the Twins entering last season. In just 49 games, he hit .302 with 4 homers, 14 steals, and .827 OPS. He averaged 3.4 fantasy points per game last season, which Scott referenced earlier. That was second behind only Ketel Marte. It's good plate discipline. You love the willingness to run. Very poor quality of contact. And the low pulled air rate doesn't look good for his power potential. I did look this up. Actually, was a better pull rate in the minors. So maybe that gives you a little bit of hope for some power potential here. Not great power, but maybe 15 home run potential for Luke Keaschall. He's also dealt with a lot of injuries. So, Chris, I know you like him a lot. What are your expectations for Keaschall?
I think it's worth pointing out all the quality of contact metrics were significantly better in the minors. They weren't like elite, but his average exit velocity at AAA last season, 87.7 miles per hour. His barrel rate, 6.3%. His hard hit rate, 34%. None of those are outrageously good numbers, but they were better than what he managed in the minors.
87.7 is bad.
Right, sure, but
It's below league average.
but it's close enough to average that I don't think we would say there is zero pop here, especially for a guy who did a pretty good job of pulling the ball in the air. But what I want to point out is 6 games into his major league career, he suffered a fractured forearm. And so all of the data we're talking about, he played, 49 games, something like that? 85% of the data that we have at the major league level came as a 22-year-old rookie who suffered a fractured forearm 4 days into, or a week into his major league career. I'm not saying that means we can't take the data that we have from last year into account, but I also don't think we should just look at what he did in 49 games in terms of his quality of contact and say, great, that's who Luke Keaschall is forever. I think the circumstances here are worth noting. Now, I don't think Luke Keaschall needs to significantly improve the quality of contact to be a viable fantasy option. It's just a question of, if he's just what he was last year, I think you're probably looking at Nico Hoerner with a little bit of batting average lost. And I think that's a perfectly fine pick at 140th because I think he's legitimately going to be a 30-plus steal guy, and I don't think that's the floor. I think he could be a 40 steal guy fairly easily. That's what he was. His pace at both AAA and the majors last year was 40-plus steals. But if he gets back to being more like a high teens to low 20s pulled air rate like he was at AAA, and he gets to more like a 40th percentile average exit velocity rather than 15th or whatever he was last year. I'm just saying there is a lot more room, I think, for improvement based on the quality of contact we saw last season. That I don't think we need to be talking about Luke Keaschall as if what we saw last year is just who he will be forever. He might be worse. That's entirely possible as well. He had a super high BABIP, and maybe then that is probably unsustainable. But this is a top prospect who had a really good minor league career, showed some real impactful skills at the major league level, and should have a lot of playing time in Minneapolis. So he's a player at his price I like targeting. I understand the arguments against him, but you give me Luke Keaschall or Ceddanne Rafaela, I'm taking the upside of Luke Keaschall every single time.
My initial inclination was to put Keaschall in my bust 1.0, partly because in the drafts I'm doing, there's enough enthusiasm for him that he goes like pick 80, 85. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm thinking, man, people are over the moon for Luke Keaschall. And then you see the ADP and it's like, I can't quibble about that too much.
I like him a lot, but I have him around 100. So, yeah.
My biggest objection to him is I just don't have a clue what's going on with him because, like, pull air rate was how he got to his power in the minors, and that was the selling point for me. And then he comes up to the majors, and it's in the blue. So he either needs to drastically improve his pull air rate or drastically improve his contact quality, which seems less likely. But, we did just see Brice Turang do it, so it's not impossible. Otherwise, there isn't much power here. And so, he could do that Nico Hoerner thing. That's basically what he looked like for the 200 plate appearances we saw him last year. Not a very big sample, but that's basically what he looked like was Nico Hoerner. But that obviously less margin for error. You gotta nail the batting average. You gotta nail the stolen bases, and there's not enough reps here for me to feel confident Keaschall's going to do that. But ADP, it's fine to gamble on it at that point because I certainly see the upside too.
Mm-hmm. And again, that ADP right around 125 across all the different websites there with Luke Keaschall. I think if he comes anywhere close to what we're expecting or what he showed last year, he's probably just good in both formats, right? Categories and head-to-head points.
Probably even better in points, I would say. I mean, in a way, because he walks more than Hoerner. So if I like Hoerner more in points, then I definitely like Keaschall more in points.
Let's talk about Jackson Holliday, formerly one of the top prospects in all of baseball. He is still only entering his age 22 season this year. Just last year, he went 17-17 while hitting 242 over 149 games. He took a big step forward from 2024. He improved the plate discipline, decent quality of contact for a middle infielder, but he has struggled mightily against lefties so far in his career, and he finished very poorly over the final 2 months of last season. This ADP is expecting Holliday to take another step forward, which is entirely possible at his age. But Scott, are you expecting it for Jackson Holliday?
Oh, it's some wishful thinking, and it's year 3 of wishful thinking with Jackson Holliday. Former number 1 overall pick, got the bloodlines. His dad was a 7-time All-Star or something like that. That is a talent you want to bet on in a long-term sense. I don't think there's much justification to lose faith in dynasty leagues, for instance. I don't think the Orioles should be shopping Jackson Holliday at this point. But we're talking about redraft here. We're all our chips in on 2025, and it's a big bet still. It's a big bet that this is going to be the year it clicks for him. And, I get back to what I was saying at the top. Okay, Jackson Holliday, he has all those marks in his favor, young pedigree, history of, son of an all-star, all of that. But I find qualities I'd rather bet on from other second basemen who are going much later. Just looking at NFBC ADP from January 1st on. Ozzie Albies is going 25 picks later. Matt McClain is going 80 picks later. Marcus Semien is going 110 picks later. I see more concrete reasons for optimism, not just wishing and hoping from them. So it's really just why make this gamble at this price for this player. I see the upside. There's an upside case for Jackson Holliday, but I don't like it for that price. And there are enough upside alternatives that I'd just rather not pay it.
Mm-hmm. I wish there was a better case for him beyond he's held his own or come close to holding his own as a 20 and 21-year-old at the major league level, and especially as a 21-year-old, right? Because he was pretty awful as a 20-year-old, but he was about an average player as a 21-year-old. That's usually, like Scott said, that's usually a pretty good thing to bet on. I just wish I had something more tangible to grab onto besides, historically, this is the kind of profile that works out in the long run. I wish there was a really good approach at the plate or really good contact skills or a really good base runner. When you compare him to Keaschall, I'm very confident Luke Keaschall is going to steal a lot of bases. I think Jackson Holliday is going to get 15-15.
Yeah, he did last year, didn't he?
Yeah, it's 17-17. Do I have any reason to think Jackson Holliday is going to go 25-25? He's been a pretty bad base runner in his major league career. He doesn't hit the ball particularly hard yet. I think
15-15 is like Caleb Durbin, right? I mean,
it's not that much better than like Xander Bogaerts. I think Xander Bogaerts was 12 and 20.
It's almost
literally
2020.
It's literally Otto Lopez.
Yeah.
He went 15 last year.
And so I wish there was an affirmative case for Jackson Holliday to justify his price. And I would feel a little better if it was like 170 or so. That's not to say I definitely won't draft him, or that I even think he's not worth drafting at his price, because I think you can certainly make the case. It's just that is not a player you can write into your lineup and say, I know I'm going to get the 125th pick's worth of production from him. I think I know I'm going to get like the 200th pick's worth of production out of him. But if him and Luis Garcia have the exact same season, which they kind of did last year, I'm not going to be surprised there either.
Luis Garcia Jr., by the way, his ADP is 230. So just for,
and he was like, what, 15, 17, something like that last year?
Yeah.
Very, very, very close. Obviously, I think playing time was a big edge for Jackson Holliday.
I totally hear you, Chris. I just wish the ADP was a little bit lower on Holliday because I want to be excited. I want to, like, would not surprise me one bit if he goes, 20 homers, 30 steals, and hits like 260 plus, and he's like a top 50 pick in drafts next year. Just given his age, his pedigree, the bloodlines, all that, it just would not surprise me. He takes another step forward this year. But you do have to pay a price where you are drafting him around other. Keaschall's not proven, but like Ozzie Albies is a proven player, kind of a wild card. We'll talk about him in a second. But there's just like I don't really see why you have to.
It's 2 rounds earlier than Albies.
Well, based on Fantasy Pros, they're going like right next to each other.
Okay,
enough. NFBC, I think, Albies is going a little bit further behind. And the format for Holliday, he is better in roto and categories. Great OBPs, great eye at the plate in the minors. We haven't seen enough of that yet to just fully expect it this upcoming season. So I would say better categories player so far at this point in Jackson Holliday's career. Ozzie Albies, let's talk about it. One of the wild cards at the position. Probably one of the tougher ones to pinpoint here. Terrible first half last season. Turns out he was still dealing with lingering effects of that fractured wrist from 2024. Then he picks things up in the second half. He looks like himself. 272, 9 homers, 7 steals, 769 OPS over 62 games in the second half. And then his season ended with a fractured hamate bone in his left hand, which is the same hand wrist he was dealing with the year prior. So, Scott, we're not exactly sure what to expect from Ozzie Albies and whether or not this injury will linger for him. But he's still theoretically in his prime and could be in a great lineup. So kind of a tough one to figure out here.
Yeah, I was prepared to be all in on Ozzie Albies before the broken hamate bone at the end of the season. And that has a reputation for sapping players of their power for a while after they return. It eventually comes back, and it hasn't always sapped players. Sometimes players come back from the broken hamate bone like nothing ever went wrong. It's obviously been a full off season to recover, so I think that's a mark in Albies' favor, but it does add a very big element of uncertainty to a player who already had an uphill battle back to fantasy prominence, let's say. But I feel this way about both Albies, and I'll talk about it for Austin Riley when we get to third base. Obviously they had very steady track records up until 2 years ago when there were injuries, and just the timing of the injuries. If you look at how they were performing right before the injury hit, it's like, okay, that same guy is still in there, and it's just injuries have prevented his numbers from normalizing to the track record we grew accustomed to, what we were used to seeing from these players. And so they're both discounted. I think Ozzie Albies more heavily, obviously. But I think they're very good gambles for the price, given that I don't really see much true talent drop off from them. Statistical drop off, sure, but I think you can attribute that to the injuries, especially when you look at you get into the game logs and look at the timing of when everything happened and how they were performing at that point. So Albies is the second baseman. I don't know if he's the single second, like the one second baseman I'm going to be most invested in. I talked about Turang might be that, but he's up there. He is one of that very large collection of questionable second basemen that have good upside. He's one that I'm going to be heavier and more heavily invested in than some of the others. I certainly like him more than Jackson Holliday, even at cost. And, a lot of times in certain formats, he does go later than Holliday.
Yeah. And again, just in the Fantasy Pros ADP, all the websites combined, Holliday and Albies right next to each other. But if you're drafting on the NFBC, Ozzie Albies going 30 picks after Jackson Holliday. So you are getting quite a bit of a discount there on Albies. I would say he's a name to watch in spring. Like, let's see what he looks like. Let's see. Not that, he probably won't be taking it all that seriously.
He might not even be playing that much.
Yeah, I don't know if he's in a WBC or not, but
I think he is.
Yeah,
I think he is for the Netherlands.
I know he's coming back from an injury, so that but
all right. Well, actually, that kind of helps it then, because obviously he's going to be playing in high profile games and things. Just like I want to see where
he's out there.
Do we see any power or anything? Because again, it's like tale of two halves last year. But if he's healthy and we start to see like that second half Ozzie Albies, then this could be a big discount on Albies here at this ADP. After him, we dropped down about 25 picks and we get to Ceddanne Rafaela with an ADP of 151. And just after him, we have Brandon Lowe with an ADP of 161. So rounds 13 to 14 in a 12-team league. Ceddanne Rafaela has second base and outfield eligibility. He's 25 years old. He improved on the margins last year, 16 homers, 20 steals, very aggressive at the plate. He barely walks, but he did drop the strikeout rate year over year, which was huge for his profile and what he did. Given that aggressiveness, he kind of is this like Pete Crow Armstrong light, where he is an extremely streaky player. He was bad through May. Then he looked like a stud in June and July. We think this big breakout is happening. And then he just struggled mightily over the final 2 months of the season. So still young enough where he could improve again. Chris, your thoughts here on Ceddanne Rafaela?
Oh, don't go to me.
Scott, your thoughts here on Ceddanne Rafaela?
I will answer the question. I think Ceddanne Rafaela is just not very good. Well, that is not true. I think he's a pretty good baseball player because he's an outrageously
he's
good
better than me.
Well, and just like among major league center fielders, there may not be more than one or two better center fielders defensively than Ceddanne Rafaela. And that helps. That's going to keep him in the lineup. But I think he's a bad hitter among major league baseball players. Again, much better than me. But I don't really see much to be optimistic about here with Ceddanne Rafaela. Like, he's got fringe, I would say solidly below average quality of contact. He also does not make a ton of contact. I guess the strikeout rate was 20%, but that means he's making contact with a lot of pitches he really should not be swinging at, because he's got a crazy high chase rate. It was 42% last season.
Fifth among qualifying batters, according to Fangraphs, the chase rate.
Yeah, he does not have the physical tools that Pete Crow Armstrong does to make this work. He certainly doesn't have the physical tools that Michael Harris does. Michael Harris hits the ball really hard a lot. I think it's great. We got 2 good months out of him last season. I don't expect that to be the case moving forward. He will have a couple of good months every year, but he was basically useless for fantasy outside of those 2 months. I guess he had 6 steals in April. He had 5 in August, but he hit 208 and 241 with 2 homers and 1 homer. I don't get Ceddanne Rafaela's price at all. Mm-hmm. I think he is. I guess he's better than Luis Garcia, because Luis Garcia is going to sit against more lefties, but I think they're very similar players offensively.
So I wrote about Ceddanne Rafaela and busts, and so my take was similar to yours. At that point, anyway, ADP showed him going 80 spots ahead of Otto Lopez and Elliot Ramos, just to give the 2 positions where Ceddanne Rafaela is eligible. And I can't really see the case for him going that far ahead of those 2, because I think he's about as valuable as those 2 in fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Again, that was Ceddanne Rafaela, who we were talking about, who is much better in a Roto or Categories League if you do want to draft him. He's pretty much unusable in a head-to-head points league because he does not walk at all.
And it's worth noting his ADP in NFBC drafts is 126.9 since the start of January. It's much lower, about 40 to 50 picks lower at other sites. So I guess his ADP at other sites is more viable, but even then, I just can't really imagine reaching a point where Ceddanne Rafaela is the player I'm most excited to draft.
I am not going to draft him. I see the bull case for him a little bit more just because he is still young and he's really, really fast. I mean, he's, sprint speed is, over 90th percentile in the league, and he made huge improvements last year in strikeout rate and hitting the ball harder. So I'm not saying he's definitely going to make more improvements, but I think there's a chance that can happen. So I see a little bit more of a bull case on him, but he's not really the player that I'm looking to draft at 150 this upcoming season. Let's talk about Brandon Lowe, who is 31 years old, traded over to the Pirates this offseason as he enters a contract year. He managed to stay healthy for 134 games, which was the second most of his career. You always do have to worry about injuries with Brandon Lowe. He's had a bunch of back things pop up throughout his career, but he put up 31 homers, 83 RBI, which is great at the position. He still hits the ball hard. He barrels it up. The fit in Pittsburgh is an interesting one because it hasn't been a great park for left-handed power over the past 3 years, but I think it's much more likely that he's an everyday player with the Pirates. So, look, not that he's great against lefties, but it could help with counting stats and things like that. For those watching on YouTube, I'll pull up his spray chart over PNC so you can see what that looks like. But, Scott, what are your thoughts here on Brandon Lowe with the Pirates this season?
Well, I mean, I'd much rather be a left-handed hitter at PNC Park than a right-handed hitter.
Of course.
Because it's like the worst for right-handed power.
Marcell Ozuna.
No, I mean, I feel like I've been pretty dour for the most part, certainly about the last few second basemen we've talked about. But, like, I can get excited about this one. I don't know why Brandon Lowe is going behind most of the players, the handful of players we just talked about. To me, he's right up there with Keaschall in terms of how valuable he is in fantasy. His 31 home runs were tied for the most at the position, and it was hardly out of character for him. I mean, he's missed some time with injuries that prevented him from getting quite to 30 home runs, but he always performs at that pace. He is clearly one of the best power hitters at the position. And now that he's out of Tampa, the biggest concern about him, just these playing time games happening with him, a lot of times having to do with platoon splits, but sometimes not even that. And I'm looking back through the years. Some years he actually hit lefties pretty well. Let me see what the career numbers are.
Career 219, 695 OPS.
That's not bad. I mean, a near 700 OPS for a left-handed batter against lefties, that's not bad. That's not bad. So he's got to stay healthy. Obviously, it's a worse lineup, but a better lineup than we're used to seeing from the Pirates. I think he's a good value here, and I'd be a little afraid of letting him fall this far because I feel like Brandon Lowe is that much more bankable than the Ceddanne Rafaelas and Jackson Hollidays of the world. I don't know that I'd be I'm not saying reach for him. What ADP are we talking about here? Like
160.
Yeah, I got him.
But it's a wide range. It's 128 on CBS. It's 236 on Yahoo.
And 171 at NFBC.
So it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, so there seems to not be a lot of consensus here surrounding Lowe. I have him 120, so I am higher than all the ADPs, but closest to CBS, maybe not surprisingly. And, to me, if I don't have a second baseman by the point Ozzie Albies goes off the board, I'm zeroing in on Lowe. To me, those two are in a tier together of, I think this guy is probably high end still, but there are some risk factors that keep me from saying definitively that he is.
Mm-hmm. Is there a format that he's better at? His walk rate has been down 2 years in a row, and he strikes out quite a bit, so that hurts him in a points league. But at the same time, in a categories league, I feel like maybe the ADP is lower just because people usually want stolen bases from their middle infielders. Mm-hmm. So it kind of presents
about the same.
It presents kind of a weird, I guess, roster build in a category.
Yeah, I think it presents some complications, but I think stolen bases are easy enough to find that
you can't downgrading the entire draft. So.
Yeah, downgrading a guy who's this clearly impactful with the bat because he doesn't steal bases, I think is kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face,
And if you're going to get somebody who dominates a category this late in the draft, home runs is a good one to get because it's pretty hard to fill at the point where Lowe's going. And he's doing it at the weakest position, arguably.
Certainly for power, I think, without question.
Yep. Let's talk sleepers, breakouts, busts. Favorite to draft at second base. Again, let's keep this moving here. Sleepers at second base. Chris, you are up first.
I was on the Fantasy Pros MLB podcast earlier today talking second baseman. So you would think I'd have a good answer for this because they asked me the same thing. I guess Jorge Polanco is my answer. If he counts, his ADP is outside of the top 200. I think that's way too low. I think Jorge Polanco is a very good hitter in a very good lineup, and certainly the top half of that Mets lineup is going to be very good. Injury concerns are what they are, but I think basically he had a bad 2024 because his knee was messed up the whole year, and then he got surgery on it and was awesome last year. So I think Jorge Polanco is probably my sleeper pick at second base.
Yeah, I like that quite a bit. His ADP is 216. Last year, he finished as the 111th overall player. So nobody seems to care about Jorge Polanco. He's another one where he doesn't give you speed. I totally get that. And his season was a roller coaster ride. Yeah. You look at the monthly numbers; they are.
But it was really like only one. It was like May was horrible.
I think he had another month where he was really, really bad. But
man.
Like, if you just plug him in a roto league, I mean, I think the numbers are going to be there by the end of the season if he's healthy, and he's projected to back cleanup
hitter behind Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, and Bo Bichette. There are not many better situations. Jorge Polanco could get, he could miss 30 games and still drive in 100 runs. Like that is a possibility here, just because he's a pretty good contact hitter with pop. It's a park upgrade for him moving from Seattle. I think he's one of the more obviously undervalued players in fantasy this year.
And to put it in perspective, Jorge Polanco point per game average last year, the same as Jose Altuve. That was last year, before that prominent spot in the Mets lineup. There are health concerns there, but he's going. He's my number 9 second baseman. The consensus is way
number
off
10 for me.
Yeah, he's 16th right now in ADP. Again, that's Jorge Polanco. Scott, a sleeper, second base.
So I like Ozzie Albies as a sleeper, but one we haven't talked about yet is Marcus Semien. I've referenced him a couple times. My case for Marcus Semien is twofold. One is just people are exaggerating the decline here. He is old. The numbers have been bad, but there's a timing issue, sort of like I was laying out for Albies. Semien with his low contact quality swing seems to be the type of hitter who suffers the most when the ball is carrying worst in April and into May when it's coldest. If you look at his numbers last year from May 28th on, this was in 71 games, so a little less than half a season. 270 batting average, 12 home runs, 8 steals, 801 OPS. It's like prime Marcus Semien. Then he suffers a season-ending injury in August, so it prevents his numbers from getting from correcting all the more. So that's fold one. Is just I think he's still good, and you don't like having him in the cold months. The second point is he's with the Mets now, and I think I was referencing this with Altuve. I think where Semien was playing his home games the past 2 years exacerbated the decline. It was just not a good venue for him. Again, being somebody who never has impacted the ball very well, comes about his power by elevating to his pull side. StatCast suggests that Citi Field, which is good for right-handed hitters who elevate to their pull side, if Semien had played every game at Semien had played every game at Citi Field over the last 3 years, he'd have 20 more home runs. He'd have 7 more home runs a year, which is enormous. So I think the venue is going to help a lot. And I think a full season of health, if we get that from Semien, is going to help a lot too. He's going more than 100 picks after Jackson Holliday. And to me, they're back-to-back in my rankings. Sure, it's not a guarantee Semien will do this, so I still give Holliday the edge. But it's only an edge. It's not 100 picks worth.
Yes, Marcus Semien's ADP, by the way, he is going 100 picks after Holliday and NFBC drafts, but Fantasy Pros, all the ADPs combined, Semien is 174, Holliday is 125, so still a 50-pick discount between those two players. I like both. I wrote up both Polanco and Semien as like this kind of Mets double-dip sleeper potential for this upcoming season, so I do like both of those quite a bit. I will mention Gleyber Torres again in a head-to-head points league. Even if the plate discipline does not remain as good as it was last year, he upped the quality of contact. He hit the ball harder, and he was playing in the second half with a sports hernia, and his first half numbers were much better. So I think there's sneaky head-to-head points potential here for Gleyber Torres, who's going outside the top 200 in ADP. And wanted to mention JJ Weatherholt as well. He's shortstop to start the season again on CBS, but it looks like he's going to play second base for the Cardinals here. And they have made a bunch of trades this offseason. They traded away Brendan Donovan recently, and that opens things up for a bit of a youth movement here with JJ Weatherholt and some other names that they have coming their way. But he was so good in the minors last year, hit 306, 421 on base percentage, 17 homers, 23 steals. He got better at each level. Extremely polished hitter, nearly as many walks as strikeouts. So could be good in a points league, could give you a little power and speed, could be good in categories. And the ADP is still outside of the top 200. I think that will continue to creep up, especially if he does anything in spring training. But JJ Weatherholt, definitely a prospect name that you need to know, who's expected to play second base. Chris, over to you for a breakout at this position.
Yeah, I said sleeper is hard to come up with for second base. What I meant is breakout is hard to come up with for second base. I think it's sleeper, Matt McClain, I think, is a sleeper. I'm not a huge fan, but there are guys I can talk myself into at second base for sleeper. Breakout is really hard. I think Ozzie Albies, if you want to include kind of bounce backs as breakouts, which I do.
Re-breakout.
Is, a re-breakout. But I know people get, upset about their definitions of these words. I get Luke Keaschall and Jackson Holliday are both my picks. I think they were both in my breakouts column. I'm more inclined to make the case for Keaschall. I think there's a more obvious affirmative case for Keaschall. Holliday, it's just you may never get a chance to draft this guy this cheap again, even though he was cheaper this time last year. So maybe that's not actually true. I wish I had a better argument for Jackson Holliday besides I think he's super talented and we'll figure it out eventually, and maybe it's in 2025. With Keaschall, I think there's a world where he's Nico Hoerner with twice as many home runs. And I don't think that's like a huge stretch for him. And that's a pretty valuable player.
Yeah, I mean, could be like a 15-30 guy with a 280 batting average if everything comes together. Mm-hmm. I wrote down Luke Keaschall and Jackson Holliday as well. I mean, my heart is just not really in it here on the breakouts, if I'm being completely honest. But those would probably be my top two picks that I could see taking another big step forward here. Scott, you set me up, so those might be your guys too.
Well, I think the way you said it was perfect. I mean, there is an obvious breakout case for both Keaschall and Holliday. Is my heart in either? No, I'm more inclined to call them bust, as a matter of fact, especially Holliday. Like I said, I think the price for Keaschall is okay, at least the average one. But I don't have great choices for breakouts here. Otherwise, I think since I'm kind of making the optimistic case for Turang, I think, it's hard to imagine a bigger breakout than last year, but I think there is still more he could break out as. And then if I'm allowed to cheat a little, I'll say JJ Weatherholt, even though he's not second base eligible. He is, I think, among the prospects who haven't debuted yet, the one who needs to be drafted the earliest, because I feel like he's going to, I feel like it's a layup that he's going to be a worthwhile contributor.
Yeah, that for now, Chris, I assume is if Connor Griffin is making the opening day.
If it looks like Connor Griffin's on the team, he's definitely going to be the first rookie taken. I think if Kevin McGonigal looks like he's going to be on the team, he'll go ahead of Weatherholt. I'm not sure he should, but, we'll see.
I mean, McGonigal's
he's the better talent
as the higher prospect.
For sure. Yep. But Weatherholt's game might be more immediately transferable.
What about a bust at second base, Chris?
Ceddanne Rafaela. I just don't. There are like different levels of busts. There's like, I don't like their price, but I like the player, and that's where like Ben Rice, when he was going 45th in NFBC drafts, that's like the ideal. I like the player, I don't like the price. Yeah. And then there's just I don't like the player. I think Ceddanne Rafaela is both. I think him and O'Neal Cruz are both versions of that. I don't like the price, and I just think the player might be bad.
All right, Scott, a bust at second base.
I'm looking at my bust.
Sleeper. Sorry, Jeff McNeil, sleeper. That's my sleeper.
Super sleeper.
Yeah, deep
Yeah.
sleeper.
All right. A little AL only action there.
All right. Yeah, the only two I have here in Bust 1.0 at second base are Holliday and Ceddanne Rafaela, and I think we fleshed both of those out pretty well.
Yep. All right, Scott, don't hate me. The names I wrote down here, Brice Turang and Jose Altuve.
Wow.
So, look, it's not, again, I don't think, look, Altuve could kind of bottom out, and that one, could get ugly, but he still has been a productive player. It's just probably not going to be me, I think, at cost. Brice Turang, it's kind of like what you were just saying, Chris. I kind of like the player. I think I kind of buy it, but the price is like, 4th round pick for Brice Turang. I don't know. It's too high for me. So
we made the case of like, yeah, what if everything goes right?
Yeah.
Like what if he does the hitting from 2025 and the running from 2024 and all of a sudden he's just
what if he doesn't get the 10 homer month,
Right. Like what if we don't get the 10 homer month? What if he's a 10 homer guy who steals 20? Well, but what if he's last year's stolen base total?
And I think if he's not getting those home runs, he's going to have more than last year's stolen base total.
I would hope so.
I would agree with that.
But we've seen both upside and downside in every direction for Brice Turang. I like to hope that there's more paths to the upside going forward, but it could be the downside.
Yeah. I kind of like to know what I'm getting from my players in Brice Turang. I just don't really know what I'm getting there.
For sure.
Which brings me to favorite second baseman in draft, and it just depends on the format. So it's Marte and head-to-head points, all things considered. So yes, second, third round pick, or Nico Hoerner in a categories league. Chris, favorite second baseman in draft?
It's Albies in any format, I think.
Wow, I have competition for.
But I could also throw Brandon Lowe and Jorge Polanco in there. I like both of them a lot.
And you didn't even say Luke Keaschall. I thought you were going to say him for sure.
I do have him ranked a little bit ahead of ADP, but relative to ADP, I'm 40 picks ahead of ADP on Ozzie Albies, to name one.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time zeroing in on one here. Turang if I go high end, Albies if I don't, but Lowe if Albies isn't there, and then if I go cheap, it's Polanco or Simeon. So I'll just say Turang. But those are kind of the different bands of second baseman I like to draft.
All right. Well, the next question was favorite middle infielder to draft at second base, but you have kind of answered it. So
yeah, good.
Simeon and Polanco for me.
Yeah, the Mets there for Chris.
Man,
and
so Chris and I are like picking the same names here.
JJ Weatherholt is the middle infielder for me. I do like to go after him quite a bit. Let's get back into second base ADP to finish out the show. We left off with Brandon Lowe, and after him, you have 3 names in the 175 to 200 ADP range. We have Semien at 175. We've talked about him a lot. Xavier Edwards at 182. Bryson Stott at 185. Edwards, last year, good batting average. 3 homers, 27 steals. So the steals came down. The pace at which he ran came way down. It was so weird. He had a stolen base every 2.3 games in 2024. He had a stolen base every 5.1 games last year. I think the good news, everything I've heard, is that the Marlins do want to run quite a bit this year. So I'm hoping the steal total comes back up for Xavier Edwards. And then Bryson Stott, look, kind of like Nico Hoerner, you know what you're going to get. It's 250 to 260, 10 to 12 homers, 25 to 30 steals. It's fine. I think it's like a totally cromulent middle infielder for... doesn't kill you anywhere and gives you some speed. So any thoughts on Edwards and Bryson Stott?
I think the problem with Stott in particular is he doesn't really help you anywhere either. Yeah. Like 24 steals
is kind of a better deep league name because he doesn't hurt you anywhere.
In a 15-team context, 24 steals is pretty valuable. Even that, though, is like you look at every other category. He hasn't had more than 66 runs since 2023. He's never had more than 66 RBI.
He hasn't been playing against lefties the past couple
He doesn't play against lefties. He has been a poor source of batting average despite sitting against a lot of lefties. So, yeah, I think in a 15-team league, he's fine, but I would feel pretty bad if that's my middle infielder in a 12-team league. Even though that's where he should go, I just can't bring myself to get excited about it.
What are you guys expecting from Xavier Edwards this year?
I mean, if last year's the downside, that's pretty good.
It's kind of like
pretty
Nico
good.
Hoerner with even less power.
So
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's easy to draw a comparison between Edwards and Hoerner, and the price difference is enormous. I think it is kind of the downside we saw from Edwards with the steals, especially. You know, the Marlins have been talking about how they want to be an aggressive base stealing team this year, so I think that's a point in Edwards' favor. I would for both position scarcity reasons and job security reasons, I would rather target Xavier Edwards than Chandler Simpson. Obviously, we're mixing positions here, but that's part of the analysis. Like, I think Edwards should be getting the attention Simpson is, because you can count on him more and he'll meet the need better. And the stolen base difference might not be as big as you think, given what we saw Edwards do as a base stealer 2 years ago.
I think the best case scenario for Chandler Simpson's a lot better, and the worst case scenario is a lot worse. The other thing that's weird about Xavier Edwards is, like, yeah, it feels like he should steal more bases because that's who he was in the minors and that's what he did in 2024. He's not actually that fast, though.
Yeah, 75th percentile.
Yeah. So that's where...
That's not nearly as important as getting good leads and jumps in the current environment.
But
Josh
we
Naylor,
also saw last year that he was not as effective a base stealer as we expected. So I think I like Edwards more than Stott. But among this trio, I think Semion's clearly the most interesting of the three.
And Edwards could turn out to be a totally fine starter in a points league as well.
Sure.
Makes a lot of contact. He's going to hit near the top of the lineup. And 2 years ago, 3.5 fantasy points per game for Xavier Edwards. Dropped down a little bit. 3 names in the 215 to 225 range. We have Jorge Polanco, Gleyber Torres, and Jose Caballero. We've spoke a lot about Jorge Polanco so far. I mentioned Gleyber Torres as a potential sleeper in a points league, so I'll get your guys' thoughts on him. And then Jose Caballero, just the quietest back-to-back 40-plus steal seasons that you will ever see. Had 44 2 years ago, 49 last year. And he is going to start for the Yankees early in the season while Anthony Volpe is returning from shoulder surgery. There's maybe a slight chance, 5-10% chance that if he's just really good, he just takes that job. But the Yankees like Volpe, so I don't think that's going to happen. What do you guys think here on Gleyber Torres and Caballero?
And I think the problem with Caballero is, 40-plus steals. At what cost?
Yeah.
I mean, in drafts, not much. But to your actual fantasy team, 4 other categories, typically.
He kind of feels like a good head-to-head categories player because he is one of these specialist types. And in a daily lineup league, you could just, he gets a lot of them as pinch runners too, so I can't even say that. But at least you could throw him in the lineup when he's in the lineup.
I think the better way to put it is he's second, third, and short and outfield eligible?
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter if Caballero is starting. You're going to have someone out of the lineup in your daily lineups league. You just put him wherever someone's out of the lineup, and you probably get close to 40 steals out of him. It's just he's a really bad hitter otherwise. So he walked a decent amount, I guess, 12.7% last year, 9% for his career. But this is like bottom of the barrel stolen base specialist. This is, I think you're arguably doing more harm to the rest of your team by having to rely on Caballero as a starter.
You know what you could do in a roto league where you could kind of, if you use him early in the season, you could kind of build up that steal total.
Sure.
And then when Volpe's back, you could just kind of get rid of him. But
I think on NFBC specifically, Caballero might be the most overdrafted player. You said the cost isn't that high, and it does get reduced when you bring all those other formats in for the Fantasy Pros average. But on NFBC, he's going ahead of Jorge Polanco and Marcus Semien.
I think a lot of those are like draft and hold leagues, so people like the position flexibility with him.
Yeah,
but
that helps.
Yeah, I hear you.
And there's something to be said for that flexibility, but there's also something to be said, again, for a guy who just brings you down in 4 out of 5 categories.
Yeah. Your thoughts on Gleyber Torres here? I do think he was affected by that sports hernia in the second half, and it kind of derailed his season a little bit. But he had a great first half, and the quality of contact improved. The expected stats were, we weren't expecting anything in Detroit, and he actually hit really well the first 3 months of the season.
I mean, he's likely to be better than a lot of the guys we've already talked about. but the upside just isn't enticing enough, at least for this format. Points leagues, it's a little better.
Yeah. In a categories league, I don't really want anything to do with Gleyber Torres, but
It'd be
in a points league, I get it.
If we could get him back to being like a 14 steal guy, I think that would make him a lot more interesting. But as it is, there's no 20 homer upside. I think the batting average is going to be pretty bad in Detroit. Kind of a runs specialist, I guess, is probably his biggest contribution. And then a good points and OBP league guy. It's worth saying with Gleyber, especially if the plate discipline gains from last year stick.
4 names in the 230 to 250 range of ADP. We have Luis Garcia Jr., Matt McClain, Caleb Durbin, who I cheated here because he's third base eligible, but expected to gain second base because he was just traded to the Boston Red Sox earlier today. So from the Brewers to the Red Sox, I don't know exactly where he's going to play. I've seen some people say second. I've seen some say third, but obviously second base would be, pretty helpful in this discussion. And then Otto Lopez is also in this range. So
we've determined Durbin doesn't have second base yet because we were back and forth on that early.
He's
on.
third
Probably
base
does
on
Yahoo
on CBS.
Okay.
But yeah, he probably does have it on. Let me check. See, Caleb Durbin.
Yeah, he's second base eligible on Yahoo.
Is second and third base eligible.
A hint: if you go to Fantasy Pros ADP, if a player is listed as eligible there, it means they're listed as eligible at one of the sites, which is usually Yahoo, because I think it's 6 appearances the previous year to remain eligible.
Yeah. Let's just start here with Luis Garcia Jr. He did take a step back from his breakout 2024, but his underlying numbers, the expected stats, were actually better in 2025. Scott, the problem here is that he's probably not going to play against lefties, so it's, how excited can you get about a strong side platoon for the Washington Nationals, I guess?
Who rarely gets on base, too. So, I mean, that further nerfs his counting stats. Yeah, I'm not very excited. It's a really batting average dependent profile, and he just hit 252 last year. Statcast says he should have hit 281, but we've only had 1 year where he's actually hit that high. So I think it's a deep league corner infield option and not a particularly exciting one.
Better 15-team league player for sure than 12-team. I think 12-team Luis Garcia is pretty fringy.
Another daily lineup league guy where you could just get him in there whenever he's in the lineup. Expected, again, to be a strong side platoon there for Luis Garcia Jr. Matt McClain, Chris, you mentioned his name a few times. You are getting him on the cheap. The ADP this time last year was 86.
Yeah.
And now his ADP is outside of the top 200. I just don't think we know who Matt McClain is. So we're still trying to figure that out.
I am surprised that there is not more latent interest in Matt McClain. I think part of it is just people were way too high on him last year, and they're moving in the opposite direction now. But the reasons people liked Matt McClain have not just completely disappeared. He's still in a great lineup. He's still a good defender, so he's going to be in the lineup every day, I think. And there is demonstrated power and speed here. Like we've seen 18 steals last season. He hit 16 homers in 89 games in 2023. I don't think he's really the 30 homer guy he looked like there, but could he get to 20 next year in that ballpark? I can absolutely see it. I think we have to keep in mind, as bad as Matt McClain was last season, he was a 25-year-old who missed the entirety of the previous season recovering from shoulder surgery. I think it's worth giving some benefit of the doubt there. Not that he should be a top 100 pick, but this should be a guy on your middle infield radar for sure. I think Matt McClain, if we're talking about like 15-ish second baseman, give me Matt McClain at 210 over Jackson Holliday 80 picks ahead. I think Jackson Holliday will be better. I'm not so confident in it that I think it's worth justifying a 6-round difference between the two of them. So I'm totally fine with Matt McClain. Oh.
What happened? Did you kick us out? I'm so confused right now. What happened? Is it just me? Are you here, Chris? Is it just me? I don't know what's going on. Chris, you're muted, so that doesn't help.
Oh, I'm muted. Oh, this is disaster.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, I guess we should keep talking about second baseman until Frank returns, should we not? Who are you just talking about? You were talking about. Do you even remember? Oh, this is great content. We're doing great here.
Okay, hold on. It seems to be back. You and I, at least.
Yeah.
I was watching the stream. We were both looking pretty frozen, but it looks like we're okay. I think we were having some StreamYard issues. I started to feel a little. I was talking about Matt McClain, and I started to see you guys looking very bored and not reacting or responding to anything I was saying. And I was like, oh, man, this is really bad content. No, turns out you guys were frozen. It might have also been bad content, but you guys were frozen.
What is going on? Oh my God.
I can tell you the last 6 minutes have definitely been bad content. Some of the worst we've ever done.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but like only 2 minutes of that are our fault.
Yeah.
Hey, I was good the whole time, apparently.
Yeah.
Based on the reactions from the commenters.
Should I start my Matt McClain spiel over? And Frank, you're going to have to do some editing here.
Yeah, I guess we could do that. I don't know. Robo Scott is on the screen. I'm trying to put him over me, but I can't actually move him around.
I don't know how to move him, man.
He's just kind of stuck there on the screen. So I would put him over myself. But yeah, Chris, what do you think about Matt McClain?
So look, all the reasons that people were excited about this guy a year ago are not completely gone. There is still power, speed. There's still a great ballpark. He is still second base eligible. He was terrible last season. There's no doubt about it. 212 xBA, that is not playable. But he is a good defensive player, so I think there's going to be value there. And it's worth keeping in mind with Matt McClain as we talk about what he did last season. He missed all of 2024 recovering from shoulder surgery. And he had a rib issue. I think he had an oblique injury that ended his previous season. Like, this dude's dealt with a lot over the past 2 years. He stayed healthy last year. That's a good sign. Now I think it's, let's see what he can do. I'm kind of willing to give Matt McClain a bit of a mulligan for last year, in part because I thought the idea of him as like a top 85 pick was kind of silly. I didn't think that was taking into account the downside that he had showed in his skill set, but I don't think he's as bad as he was last year. And if he is, oh no, my 215th or 230th pick didn't work out. That's what happens with 230th picks. I'd rather target a youngish player with a broad skill set like Matt McClain and see what happens there.
Yeah, my confidence in Matt McClain isn't any higher than it was last year. I mean, it was pretty low last year. It's even lower now. But the price is so low that it's just like, well, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm even kind of wrong about Matt McClain?
You just look at what they did last year. Jackson Holliday was better. Was it 7 rounds worth of better? I really don't think that's the case here.
Mm-hmm. 2 other names in this range of ADP. Again, I mentioned Caleb Durbin, traded to the Red Sox earlier today on Monday when we're recording this. Obviously, his swing should do pretty well in Fenway, and he's third base to start on CBS. Might gain second base eligibility. The other name here is Otto Lopez, who was just rock solid middle infielder, went 15-15 last year, and the XBA right around 270 each of the past.
There's some sneaky upside there if the batting average gets to 270-ish, yeah.
I think both of these guys could be totally fine middle infielders that hit, again, like 270, 15-15. I could see both of them doing that. Caleb Durbin and Otto Lopez.
I like them more for, well, I guess an AL only league in Durbin's case now, and then NL for Otto Lopez, because I feel like those are like in those extremely deep leagues where you're just never getting anything off the waiver wire. You want safe, projectable at bats.
Yep.
And I think they're going to be pretty good for that. While still delivering some totals. Now, if you get into a 12-team mixed league, it's scraping the bottom of the barrel as far as your middle infield options go. You could maybe get by with them, but they're obviously not doing much to help your team. So I'd rather shoot for upside. I'd rather shoot for like a McLean, for instance, in a format like that. But if he's already gone, Lopez and Durbin might be your best bet, and they might be startable for you all year.
3 names in the 260 to 275 range of ADP. We have Brendan Donovan, Luis Arraez, and Colt Keith. Arraez, again, doesn't have second base eligibility yet on CBS, but he is expected to play second base with the Giants, so he should gain it early on. Brendan Donovan was traded over to the Mariners. So, look, 2 guys probably going to give you good batting average here. Arraez, probably much more batting average than Brendan Donovan. But, Scott, just an example of 2 more names where if you missed out on others in a points league, they could kind of be like ultimate fallback options. Donovan and Luis Arraez.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have that much to add. I think Arraez with the signing with San Francisco, his stock definitely went up in my eyes. I moved him up a few points in my first base rankings. Unfortunately, that's the only place he's eligible. I think it improves his chances of getting his batting average over 300. It was already likely to be there. But more than anything, we know he's regaining second base eligibility in short order. We know he's an everyday player still. And I think the price has never been more reasonable for him, at least since he first became a thing in fantasy. Batting average is really hard to fill late in drafts. In points leagues, as infrequently as he strikes out, he's, in a 12-team context, he's not going to set you apart, but he's going to be starting for somebody after a while. After some of these gambles fail, you get the bad side of some of these upside downside cases. Arraez is going to end up getting picked up and started for somebody in a points league. So I think he's going to be, it'll look better once he's second base eligible, but we know for sure that's coming.
Colt Keith, he has second base and third base eligibility. Underwhelming start to his career so far, but he's still just 24 years old. And Chris, he did make some improvements last year. He upped his walk rate. The OPS was up, improved his quality of contact as well, but probably not going to play against lefties. I don't know what the upside is, like 15 to 20 home runs and an okay batting average for Colt Keith. It just doesn't get me too excited, I guess.
Yeah, I'm pretty unenthused by the idea of, oh, look, he got better in a rate stat when he went from playing occasionally against lefties to never, basically. I think 90+% of his plate appearances came against righties last season. So it's like, I don't know, even if he is an 800 OPS against righties, it's not that valuable. In a 15-team league, that can be useful, but I don't think Colt Keith is likely to matter at all in any 12-team leagues.
Look, if I could just circle back to Donovan real quick, because I think I glossed over just how good he is in points leagues. 2.77 points per game, Brendan Donovan last year. Brandon Lowe was 2.79. Jose Altuve, 2.81. I mean, that's a minuscule difference between those two and what Donovan did on a per game basis. So, points leagues, he I don't know where I have him ranked, but quite a bit higher. I can't pull it up quick enough. But yeah, I made my case. Brendan Donovan, points league specialist.
5 names in the 275 to 300 range of ADP. We have Tommy Edman, Ernie Clement, Lenine Sosa, JJ Weatherholt, and Brett Beatty. We spoke about Weatherholt already. Edman, his season was derailed by an ankle injury. He had off-season surgery, not a guarantee to be ready for opening day. So not really excited at all about Tommy Edman. Ernie Clement, he's going to be the starting second baseman. Bo Bichette is now gone with the Blue Jays. So batting average, not much else there with Ernie Clement. Lenine Sosa, we mentioned him on the first base preview. Had a nice season last year. We just not really sure how much he's going to play with the White Sox. Weatherholt, we spoke about. Brett Beatty, I'm kind of intrigued here. I wish his playing time, I guess, was a little bit more cemented, but I think between DH and maybe left field, like they could find ways to get him in there. And he's still young. He hits the ball really hard, and he was really good over the final 2 months. So, Scott, I feel like maybe you've made this case as well, but I think a really deep sleeper, I'm kind of intrigued by Brett Beatty.
I'm definitely intrigued by him, but all the additions the Mets have made at the positions he plays, I'm having a hard time calling Beatty a sleeper at this point because I just don't see any way he gets at-bats against lefties. I mean, you can't get him and Vientos in the lineup at the same time unless Beatty's playing left field, which just seems like a stretch defensively. And a lot of people think Carson Benj is going to be the left fielder. So I doubt Benj is sitting that often for Beatty.
I don't think it would make any sense for Benj is lefty. I don't think it would make very much sense for him to sit for Brett Beatty. Yeah.
So yes, I think Beatty took a big step toward realizing his offensive potential, which I think is considerable, certainly from a second base, third base context, the positions he's eligible. But I just don't think the playing time is going to be enough. It'd have to be like a 15-team bench option and just hope enough players get hurt that Beatty plays more than expected.
Yeah. In the 300 to 350 range of ADP, we have Jonathan India, Andres Jimenez, and Willie Castro, who signed a 2-year deal with the Rockies this offseason. So, perhaps a little bit of a batting average boost there. Very deep league name. Chris, any of these stand out to you? India, Andres Jimenez, Willie Castro.
Every offseason, there's some mediocre hitter who signs with the Rockies, and we kind of talk ourselves into them being useful. And
Thairo Estrada, guilty as
who was the last one who was?
Thairo Estrada last offseason was definitely one of them.
Who was the last one who actually ended up being good because he went to Coors Field? I can't think of it.
It wasn't a signing, but Nolan Jones, the trade, worked very well.
Yeah, Nolan Jones getting out there, but he was young. Yeah, he wasn't a... But yeah, we've done this a few times, and I guess Mickey Moniak kind of worked. Nobody was actually excited about him when he got there.
Yeah,
and I kind of don't get why people are excited about him now, but that's fine. He's at Coors Field, so I guess that's fine. But yeah, I would not be shocked if Willie Castro was useful for fantasy this year for sure, because Coors Field will inflate that BABIP. Maybe he can hit 270 with double-digit homers and 20 steals. I could see that happening, but it's certainly not something I'm betting on. And then India and Jimenez, Andres Jimenez is a poor man's Bryson Stott, and that's not really a particularly positive thing to say about someone.
He had 30 steals in both 2023 and 2024, but that was in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if he's going to get back to running at that pace with the Toronto Blue Jays. 3 other names I missed here. How could I? Brooks Lee, Jake Cronenworth, and Jeff McNeil. Chris, you did mention Jeff McNeil earlier. A very deep sleeper.
He is coming off of thoracic outlet syndrome surgery, and so I think it's a huge wild card. But Jeff McNeil has made some real strides over the past couple of years. He increased his bat speed around the All-Star break in 2024. And his underlying numbers were pretty solid last season. 330 xWOBA, 327 xWOBA con. That's bad, but that was his best since 2022. And he's in a Sacramento ballpark that inflated production by a huge margin last year. So if he's healthy and what he was last year, I could see a world where Jeff McNeil hits 270 with 15 homers and, useful-ish counting stats when he's on the field. I'm not saying it's super likely or that there's a huge upside there, but I would not be surprised if Jeff McNeil was useful when he's healthy next year or this year.
Names outside of the 350 ADP that I think are at least a little intriguing: Chase Mydroth, Christian Campbell, Nolan Gorman, Christian Moore, Luis Angel Acuna, Sungmoon Song, who signed with the Padres this offseason. He came over from Korea. Gavin Lux traded to Tampa Bay, and Nasim Nunez, who is with the Nationals. Oh, also Cole Young. So lots of names here again. Cole Young, Nasim Nunez, Gavin Lux, Sungmoon Song, Luis Angel Acuna, Christian Moore, Nolan Gorman, Christian Campbell, Chase Mydroth. It's got lots of names here, but I could see deep league upside cases for maybe any of them, all of them.
Yeah, I mean, lottery tickets.
Yeah.
Lottery, in the truest sense, in that they're very unlikely to pay off, but they could pay off big. I think especially Christian Moore, given his prospect pedigree. Nolan Gorman, given the power upside. In a points league context, I think Jonathan India could be something of a lottery ticket because of his on-base skills, doubles, prowess. And he's somebody who could benefit some from the fences moving in. We've seen him approach 20 homers before. So I kind of like him for points league specifically. Gorman and Moore, I think, better category lottery ticket plays.
How about maybe we see Jet Williams play a little second base? And I know Brice Turang's very good, but I saw a quote that the Brewers kind of view Jet Williams as someone who could play all over the field right now. He might be their starting shortstop. He might be their starting third baseman. He might be in AAA. But if something happens to Brice Turang, Jet Williams could certainly factor in at second base for them as well.
Yeah. Jet Williams, by the way, prospect traded from the Mets to the Brewers in the Freddie Peralta trade. Shortstop only to start the season on CBS, but could gain other eligibilities. Nassim Nunez, I'll just mention the name. Big speed in the minors. I have no idea if he can hit at all, but he's 25 years old. He's with the Nationals. 36 steals in the minors last year, 52 in 2023, 70 back in 2022. So he is very fast. Prospects of note, Travis Bazzana with the Guardians. We probably see him at some point this year. And then Tommy Troy with the D-backs. Probably would take some injuries, but, he has put up some good numbers in the minor league. So Bazzana of the Guardians and Tommy Troy of the D-backs. We are going to wrap there for Scott and Chris. I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning into Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify, and we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.